do it a little bit. We call it a sing series. Walk to the sun. What'd you say? You ready? Okay. Good morning. Welcome to the forum at All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church. My name's Alex Westerfelt. I'm proud to represent the forum committee. That's a core group of dedicated individuals who develop the program schedule for the entire 9 months that we do programs. Those dedicated members may come and go, but the forum remains. It's been here since 1943. It's a platform for discussing significant issues in the contemporary world. So our routine is to have the speaker present for about 35 minutes. We then pause, take a collection, and announce the next week's topic. This is followed by a Q&A period of about 20 minutes. Program's live streamed on YouTube, so if you're watching on live, you can put your questions in the chat during the Q&A period, and someone here will ask your question on your behalf. For those of you in the audience, make sure your cell phones are on silent. So I'm pleased to introduce this morning's speaker, Richard Thompson. Richard's a member of All Souls. He's been active on the forum committee and on the board, actually, and that's where I first got to know him. There are few people about whom we can say they are guileless, but Richard is one of those, in my opinion. He never ceases to surprise me, and I often take delight in hearing his point of view. His topic this morning is the good and the bad of entertainment media and LGBTQIA plus people. So I think it's safe to say we can look forward to hearing what Richard has to say.
Thank you, Alex. The bow tie man is back. So anyway, before we get too far into this, I wanted to say a little bit of a word on definitions. I had a very kind, nice gentleman ask me some questions, and I want to clear them up because I'm sure he's not the only one that has them. There are many people that are confused by some of the letters. I have put up here today LGBTQ plus acceptance. That was not very politically correct of me. I should have probably put the I and the A as well. And LGBTQIA stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or just trans these days. The Q stands for queer and questioning. The I stands for intersex, which is the community that has both an ovary and a testy. And the A stands for both asexual and ally. And we keep adding letters on. So the plus is always necessary to put at the end. So other groups that feel that they're a part of the community do not feel left out, because we would never want to do that. What we're going to be talking about today is the entertainment media. And as Alex noted, there's many things in our society that they're credited with. Some of them are good, some of them are terrible. But we are going to get into their impact on the acceptance and rejection of LGBTQIA plus people. And it is my belief that this is one of the main reasons where we see such a generational difference in support for LGBTQ people and LGBTQIA plus rights amongst younger generations compared to older generations like baby boom and silent generation. Before we get too far into that, though, I want to give credit where credit is due. These are not new ideas that I'm going to be discussing here today. I also want to go over how we're going to be going through this. We're going to go through different eras and the types of entertainment media you might see on TV or in the movies. And I'm going to provide some analysis from a Pepperdine study that I would like to give credit to, a Gallup poll about generational support for same-sex marriage, and some of my own personal analysis on why some of these TV shows impacted certain generations with their acceptance of LGBTQ in the way that they did. You will also observe that I'm wearing a rainbow bow tie today. That obviously is in honor of the presentation I'm giving for the community. Before we get into the yeah, before we get into the analysis, I want to tell a little anecdote that kind of illustrates what all this is about. When I was in seventh and eighth grade, middle school, I think I would have rather had the plague than been openly gay. That is probably not even an exaggeration, or maybe slightly, but it was bad, especially amongst guys. That's gay, you're a F, all those things I don't want to say at the church and on KKFI radio, but I think we all know the word I was just referring to, that was used every day. I heard it every day at school. So I hid it, um, even though I was questioning at the time. Fast forward 5 years, and I'm in my freshman year of college. I'm coming out to people, and my sister's in middle school. And I am very, very worried about how she's going to take it. I came up to my parents. It was fine. They'd had gay friends for a long, long time and were wonderful, very supportive, still loved me, wanted me to be happy. I lucked out there. But I was pretty scared about coming out to Allie. So one day, I sat Allie down, privately, because I didn't want to make a big, scene in front of a bunch of people. And I said, Allie, I love you, and I want to tell you something about me. I think I might be bisexual or gay. Um, but as your brother, I don't want to keep secrets from you. And she started laughing. And I thought, oh my God, is she gonna, say something really nasty or tell me she never wants to see me again or make fun of me? Why the heck is she laughing? And so I said, do you have a problem with that? And she said, oh, no, absolutely not. I think it's really cool. And I was like, what? And because, as I mentioned, it was not cool when I was in eighth grade. And she said, yeah, all my friends want to have a gay best friend. And the reason why I think things had changed so drastically in about 5 years was partially because of a change in representations in the entertainment media. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. We'll return to this story. All right, so we're going to start out with the baby boom generation. As far as I know, and someone might be able to find a obscure show of some sort, but as far as I know, on American television, in the movies, in the 60s and early 70s, there was little to no positive representation of LGBTQ people and characters. I may be mistaken about this, but if I am, it was rare. Um, my dad, my mom, I asked them both who were around at the time. They said, despite the fact that they're very supportive of me, no, was nothing when we were growing up. And so most of what you would hear about homosexuality, uh, or trans or bisexuality, anything else, would have come from churches and the occasional public service announcement about the dangers of the homosexual. I'm not exaggerating there. Those were literally commercials at the time, warning people about gay people. Um, Anyway, so because of all this, you can see why getting these messages that even today, baby boomers would be less accepting of LGBTQ, and the Pepperdine study does confirm that. And baby boomers are also less supportive of issues like same-sex marriage, though that has changed a bit. But I think when you grow up with no positive image of LGBTQIA plus, that's how you feel. All right, so in the late 70s, early 80s, that started to change a little bit. There was a show called Soap, which some of you know the gentleman Craig Lubeau. He actually introduced me to the show. It's a hilarious show, and it's mostly just meant to be silly and funny and make you laugh. It's called Soap because it's a spoof off soap operas. It exaggerates even more than regular soap operas exaggerate to be funny. And there's an openly gay character on the show named Jody. Now, Jody um, is mostly a source of the audience's amusement, but I don't really fault the show for that because pretty much all of the characters are. It's just a funny show. And he conforms to all the stereotypes. He's effeminate. He's into fashion. There's nothing wrong with this, but he does do drag a lot, which, some gay guys, some lesbians, some straight people like to do, but some people don't. Um, However, he does have a little bit of depth. There's one episode where he comes out to his brother, and his brother starts laughing and says, "No, you're not gay. You're just, you know, pulling my leg." And Jody says to him, "No, I am gay. And if you don't love me now as a gay man, you never loved me at all." And for that time period, that was a powerful message. And the brother comes around and says, "Oh, you are serious? Well, yeah, I still do love you." Um, so because of this depth of characters like Jody, you can see why Gen Xers who are growing up at the time might be a little bit more supportive than baby boomers or even, the silent generation. It is not an entirely positive representation. And beyond Jody being gay and his gay relationships and stuff, there's not a whole lot to his character. But you can see why things are getting a little bit better. Okay, when we hit the 80s, there's the AIDS crisis, right? And this is again Gen Xers a little bit later in the generation, a little bit later in age, watching this. And there were a series of movies, TV shows, stuff that came out with the intent of trying to create sympathy for gay people, particularly gay men with AIDS. Because Ronald Reagan and Congress and many state legislators were not willing to do anything about it. In fact, until his friend died from AIDS, Ronald Reagan wouldn't even say the word. People were dying like right and left, and he wouldn't talk about it. He was either afraid that it would hurt him with his base, or he didn't care, or both. So movies like Philadelphia and Angels in America that I've chosen to focus on here that came out in the 80s and very early 90s uh, were intended to expose all the suffering that gay people go through, particularly AIDS victims, but also Angels in America has a closeted gay man who's a Mormon that is trying to come out. Um, that shows, his struggles with his family and all that. Um, they did succeed in creating some sympathy, and that was good because we needed funding for AIDS research. We needed funding for clinics for people to go to for, when they were nearing the end of the AIDS cycle, to pass away in without, being thrown out the door. Um, the problem with this though is that well, there's a few. One, most of this doesn't focus on lesbians at all, who actually are in the lowest risk group for HIV/AIDS. The other problem is that it doesn't show, that gay people can be happy, healthy, well-adjusted in their relationships, even if society's being difficult. And one of the mantras, the conversion therapy people carried at the time and still do carry to this day is that, you know, today they've changed around a little bit to say they're not like freaks or something, but you can't be happy and be gay. There's something innately unhealthy about a same-sex relationship. You know, and I know if you're watching this, that's not true, but these movies don't really um, fight that stereotype very much. They're not designed to do that. They're designed to create sympathy for the suffering that society and HIV was causing people at the time. So you can see based on some of these things why Pepperdine and the Gallup poll I mentioned say Gen Xers are more supportive than baby boomers by a pretty good margin, especially in the Gallup poll, but less supportive than millennials and the newest crop. And then we hit the late 90s and early 2000s, and there's a major breakthrough. But the shows I mentioned before, particularly the movies like Angels in America and Philadelphia, were generally seen by people that sought them out. And what I mean by that is if you went to a church that was extraordinarily anti-gay, you probably didn't watch Angels in America or um, Philadelphia. Um, Maybe you saw Soap and then turned it off when you realized Jodie was gay. But these shows reached a lot of people that were either neutral or didn't know much about the issue yet, because they were on mainstream TV. I've highlighted a few here. There is Queer Eye, uh, and other than Queer Eye, most of these shows start addressing a little bit more of the full person. You know, more about the relationships. Yes, they're same-sex relationships, but what's the specific relationship like? Anyway, the Queer Eye, the idea was we're going to have fun with stereotypes. Uh, you know, hmm, Maybe it's good that gay men could help a straight guy or a straight woman with a better haircut, with better fashion, with uh, teaching them how to cook. All these things that are stereotypes, but their spin was this is a good thing. It's not bad. It's great that gay guys are into things we consider traditionally effeminate in our society. And this particular show, by the way, this is revisiting my story earlier, was the reason why my sister and her friends had decided they wanted a gay best friend. They wanted that guy that would take them out shopping and pick out a dress to wear to the big dance. I mean, they thought that was cool. And some guys aren't all that into fashion, so they thought it'd be fun to go dress their gay man best friend up too. Um, which is kind of funny, but at the same time, at least it's a positive thing. I mean, it's a lot better than hearing a commercial about the dangers of the homosexual. Um, So anyway, and then Will and Grace illustrated again the same-sex best friend. This is probably to this day the most popular show I'm aware of that had prominent gay characters. Although there's been many others that were very popular. Anyway, and Will has a lot of depth to him that I think is interesting. Yes, he does. He is into fashion. He does, have a spiffy looking haircut and all that stuff, but he's also, a lawyer. He's an upstanding member of the community. His relationships, when he has them, are generally monogamous. Um, so not that you have to have those things, but it's good that we show some variety here, I think. Jack is sort of the opposite. He's not only really into fashion, but he's also very effeminate. His relationships last for all of 20 minutes. And that's just kind of who he is. Um, I also want to note that Ellen had her show at the time, a very prominent representation of a lesbian. And I think that's very important because, again, I feel like when we talk about LGBTQ issues, we tend to talk about gay men, particularly gay white men, and I think that leaves out other people in the community that are just as prominent or just as important. Um, anyway, so you can see here that while we're seeing a lot more of gay people in different lights, being sad, being happy, being having this multifaceted full person, we still have some of the stereotypes, and we still have some issues, but it's changing. And that's why millennials, my generation specifically, is more supportive than Gen X or Baby Boomer, and definitely more supportive than Silent Generation for those that are left. But still a little bit less supportive than the following generation. I wanted to do a slide on the L word. I am including this because, again, I feel it's very unfair that we focus on gay white men all the time. I mean, that's just not probably even a majority of the community. Um, So again, this show has a lot of lesbian representation and relationships, and sort of ask the question, why are we always thinking of gay men? Why don't we think about lesbians and any specific issues there too, and show them as full people beyond, the stereotype of being a tomboy or whatever. Um, there's depth of relationships, some of them are one night stands, some of them are long-term relationships. So we see all that multifaceted people there. And some of the characters in the show conform to stereotypes and others don't. Um, and that was primarily in the 2000s, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so for a really, really long time, trans issues lagged behind in the entertainment media. And that to me is very frustrating, um, because I think that's one of the reasons why, same-sex marriage, workplace non-discrimination, housing non-discrimination, a lot of different things for the LGB done a lot faster than trans. And it's one of the reasons why I think we don't see as many anti-gay bills in conservative state legislators anymore, but in conservative state legislator tours, we do see a lot of anti-trans bills, including in our state of Missouri. I'm sure a lot of you are aware, as unfortunate as it is. But that is starting to change as well. We have a show on Amazon Prime called Transparent, that I watched for a while. It To give you a little background, there's a gentleman who's a grandpa on the show, who has decided that he's tired of living in a body that he's lived in his whole life where he's never been happy or comfortable with it. And it does kind of illustrate that, transgender is not a choice. It's just who you are, because this guy's been suffering for so long and he finally just decides to heck with it. If people don't accept me, so what? I need to be happy. Um, so it shows the emotional depth of her coming out. I should use female pronouns here because this is a male to female trans person. And she first comes out to her family and some close friends. And the family, fortunately, is pretty progressive and accepting, but there's a couple of specific issues. There's an episode where she tries to simply use the restroom, and this shows how difficult things are for trans people. I mean, heck, they can't even go to the bathroom in peace. Um, a- and she's simply standing in line waiting to use the stall with her daughter right next to her, and her there's another woman in there that comes out and looks at her, and she's not to the point where she can pass yet, so she says, "You're a man," and which first of all is inaccurate, but second of all, why are you getting so upset? And she says, "You're traumatizing my teenage daughter in here," and the teenage daughter is just kind of washing her hands like, I don't really care. But um and the daughter of the trans woman has some four-letter words for her, and says, "These kids don't look particularly traumatized to me. I mean, she's wearing clothes. How different is it if you see her standing in line to use the stall than standing in line in the middle of the mall, or standing in line to check out at the mall?" I'm very happy that we are starting to see some more trans representation in the entertainment media. And I think it's the reason why I've noticed that the generation just below me is a little bit more accepting than the generation before me. Although, if memory serves me correctly, I haven't seen a lot of studies on that yet. These are the newest shows, and I want to highlight something here that I think is very important. What we're seeing a lot of is the full person. Um, these characters are gay characters in shows, but the show isn't about the fact that they're gay. And the episodes with them, they might bring their partner or boyfriend or girlfriend in, but it's not specifically about those issues. It's about who they are as a full person. I've picked New Amsterdam because that's the show I've been binging on lately, and it has a number of LGBTQIA plus characters. This is Dr. Fromm in the picture. Dr. Fromm heads the psych department. He is a very gifted therapist. And I didn't know he was gay and married to a man until about 3 or 4 episodes in. There were episodes that highlighted the therapy he was doing with his patients, which was outstanding, with him working with other doctors in a very great collaborative way. But I had no idea he was gay. He doesn't conform to most of the stereotypes, and I mean, if he did, that would be fine, but they didn't mention it. And what I think is cool about that is he's a person, and the fact that he's gay is just like him being left-handed. Um, there's a couple other examples. There's a lesbian couple that seeks his counseling, um, and but nothing about the counseling has to do with the fact that they are a lesbian couple. What it has to do with is that one of them is deaf, and she just got an ocular implant that's driving her nuts and making her hear ringing and stuff. And they're worried about her taking it out because then they'll have to go back to sign language all the time. Nothing in that is specifically gay, or even what most people stereotype as gay. It's just about them having this relationship, and they come to a positive resolution. There is an episode where Dr. Fromm gets in a bit of an argument with his partner because he wants to adopt another kid. They already have like 3 or 4, and the partner thinks they're stretched pretty thin as is. Um, they're adopting, but really nothing about that is specifically gay. In fact, I can only think of one episode where the dad won't come to visit the grandkids, or the granddad, Dr. Fromm's dad won't come to visit the grandkids, that really deals with that issue. Um, there's another character on the show named Dr. Bloom, and she, I think, is bisexual, although I don't want to put a label on her when I'm and have it be inaccurate. Um, but you don't know that until the third or fourth season. Um, she starts dating this woman, and but even their romance, the only thing I can remember from the recent episode I watched where they were getting together was that it was specifically LGBTQ, was she said to this girl she started dating and living with, I've never been in a relationship with a woman, but I've been with women. And she doesn't say, really anything else about it. In fact, she's more concerned with telling her that she used to be addicted to Adderall. Um, so again, we see a full and complete person in these shows, and we don't just rely on, uh, you know, talking about the fact that they're LGBTQ. There is even a trans, I'm gonna forget if they're a doctor or if they're a nurse, character on the show, but most of the episodes aren't about them being trans. In fact, it's possible you could watch the show and not even realize that it's a trans character. Um, there's one episode where the medical director specifically seeks out people in minority groups to try to ask them how he can make them feel more welcome. And the doctor says, well, it's not just about getting my pronouns right, it's also about accepting me as the gender that I identify with. And so that 30-second segment is about them being trans, but the rest of it's not. It's just about them being a good, I forget if it's a doctor or nurse, but it's just about them being good at that. So again, it's just not a big deal. It's like being left-handed, and that is one of the reasons why I think our youngest generation, the people under me, is so accepting, and it just doesn't seem to matter to them at all. It's you know totally cool. It's not a big deal. You're not any different. You just changed your favorite color from red to blue. Uh, you know. Um, there's also, I want to note, a RuPaul hosts a game show. And that is definitely something that is significant because it's not about him being gay or drag or anything. He just has two pairs of people on the show compete for money. And sometimes it's a same-sex couple, sometimes it's an opposite-sex couple, sometimes they're friends, neighbors, or relatives. This analysis here was confirmed by the Pepperdine study that the youngest generation is more accepting, and the Gallup poll that says more than 63% of people in that generation support same-sex marriage. These are the studies I've cited, and with that, I'll open things up for questions. Thank you.
So we'll take this moment to take care of a couple housekeeping tasks. Just a reminder, each week our program is broadcast on KKFI at noon on Thursdays. And our thanks to KKFI for their support of the forum. And speaking of support, we pause briefly to take up a collection. This helps offset the costs of providing the forum. Your contributions, both in person and online, either today or even later, go towards paying the costs of not only promoting the forum in social media, but also for the staff time in terms of that promotion, in terms of getting these presentations together, media, the slides that you saw, that sort of thing. And then the tech support that we have so that we reach as wide an audience as possible with the forum. I urge you to consider joining others who have set up a monthly contribution to the forum. That's a great way to continue ongoing support, and so we would welcome that. If you have any questions about that, you can talk to me or you can contact us through the chat if you're online and have questions. Very quickly, next week's topic is Denise Lieberman. She will be presenting for the plaintiffs the legal fight against Missouri's abortion ban. So she'll be talking about the suit brought by a number of ministers in Missouri against the abortion ban. So we're going to turn to the Q&A this morning, and I'm going to talk a little slowly because Richard has taken a bio break and he wanted me to not get through this too quickly. So remember, for the questions, come up to the microphone, speak clearly into the microphone. We ask that we do one question per person until everyone's had an opportunity to ask a question. And please, no speeches. You may have something very, very interesting to say, but we'd much prefer to hear the speaker's response to your question. So thank you.
Because I do not have cable, my viewership, if that's a word, of some of these programs is very limited. But what I wanted to ask you about was the depth of characters on some of these programs. It seems to me that focusing on the more charactered aspects of some of these individuals on these programs might tend to distract from the everyday normalcy of all of those letters that you were mentioning. And I was wondering if you had any feelings about any of that.
Yeah, so I think if I understand your question correctly, it's an excellent question, by the way. Um, I think that's one of the things that in the last slide I was talking about was starting to change with shows like New Amsterdam. I mean, it's not the only show by any means, but that, okay, yes, the character's gay, but there's also, that they're an outstanding therapist or that they're dealing with this issue with their partner because their partner has an ocular implant that's driving them nuts. Or they're a trans doctor, but it's not about the fact that the doctor's trans. It's just about the fact that they're really good in the emergency department. Um, so sometimes it's good to have characters where they're just regular people. It reinforces the idea that we're no different than you. Um, and that can be a positive thing. Sometimes it's fun to play around with stereotypes, though. And, I don't think it's just LGBTQ that does that. I think that many other minority groups and women sometimes uh, have fun with some of the stereotypes. I'm not going to go into specifics because I don't want to get myself in trouble, but I don't think that LGBTQIA plus is the only minority group that does that. Um, and Queer Eye made it cool. And the L word had a similar effect for lesbians, I felt like, although I can't speak to personal experience there since I'm not a lesbian. One of the things that your question kind of brought up for me is um, we're also seeing in commercials a change, a shift. In the past, a commercial would only include a same-sex couple and never a trans person. Um, if the commercial was specifically about that, like if they were marketing an HIV drug, or if they were marketing on a gay TV channel, or at Pride, or it was somehow directly designed to deal with gay people. Um, but now I've seen same-sex couples in commercials for pharmaceuticals that have nothing to do with HIV or anything specifically gay. Um, and they're not even political either. In the past, sometimes you have a political commercial about, this happy lesbian couple getting married. Why can't they get married? This is unfair. But it's not even about that. It's just, they're trying to sell something and they thought it'd be cool to have a gay interracial couple and then a straight white couple as well, to kind of have a variety. Um, so I hope that answers your question.
Richard, I thought your presentation had a almost an academic quality to it. In
Thank you.
fact, I'm tempted to address you as Professor Thompson.
Well, I've got
Uh,
the bow tie on, so
that's it, right? But is there a way to publish this presentation in some form? Number one, and secondly, would you conclude that the entertainment industry overall over that long period of time actually was helpful? Uh,
yeah. So to address the second part first, yes, I would say the general theme of the presentation was that over time, the entertainment media was for the most part helpful. I mean, there were problems here and there, but for the time, a lot of these shows I was talking about, the L Word, Will and Grace, were kind of revolutionary. Um, Maybe today we'd look back and say, gosh, there's some stuff in here we probably wouldn't see anymore. But yeah, I would say generally positive. And I would also say their evolution to a more complete person has been a positive one. And now I'm going to forget the first part of your question. The publishing. So it's my understanding that this is all published as a podcast for KKFI community radio. I don't know if there's any other way to publish it. Obviously, I do not. I mean, I have a master's in nonprofit management and an undergraduate degree in psychology, so I'm not really qualified to publish an academic study. There are studies other than the Pepperdine study. As I noted at the beginning, I did not come up with this idea that the entertainment media had been helping LGBTQ people. But I did, you know, I read about it and add in some of my own personal experience.
There are some online forums, Medium, for example. I don't know if you know about Medium, but you can go on there and you can publish your own little pieces, and then people pick them up sometimes, and they go off into other forms of media as well. So that's an option.
I do have a written form of this, so
I'd encourage you to look at that. When you talked about different media shows, you didn't mention Queer as Folk. Do you know of that program? Is there a reason you didn't mention that?
I have heard of Queer as Folk, but I have never seen an episode that I can recall, so I didn't feel qualified to include that. One of the cool things is that the number of shows with LGBTQ characters and or real people is increasing significantly. I mean, Jody back in the late 70s was kind of a rarity. Um, in fact, I don't think there's any kind of about it. He was a rarity. Um, so yeah, I have not checked out that show, but I would imagine with it does have a pretty solid following from what I hear. So that would be interesting to research, what impact that show has had.
For the past 4 or 5 years, I've been not watching American TV, but I've been watching foreign TV. And I noticed that these uh, detective stories and whatever from Germany, France, and the Netherlands and all that are following the pattern of normalizing relationships, like you said, like Amsterdam, and that they started in this early. Do you find it surprising that people like England, which had made homosexuality illegal and punishable by jailing, being put in jail, they become suddenly progressive in these countries and normalizing all sorts of relationships.
Yeah, I mean, I think in Western Europe, it sounds like I've not seen a lot of entertainment media from Western Europe, but it sounds like based on what you're saying, the same things happening there. As I would like to address as far as gay relationships being illegal. I mean, yes, in Western Europe, they were illegal for an alarming amount of time. The most notable person prosecuted from that would probably be Oscar Wilde. But they were illegal here until Lawrence v. Texas, and I'm going to forget what year that was. But even then, it was so nasty at the time that Antonin Scalia wrote into his opinion, which is supposed to be dispassionate and professional, that he didn't want openly gay people as teachers in his schools or scoutmasters for his children, and the list went on, but I can't remember the rest of it, which I just found extraordinarily unprofessional. Um, anyway, the reason why I bring that up is because it should be noted that until relatively recently, it was also illegal here in some states.
Hi, great presentation. Thanks.
Thank you.
Gen X movie and TV buff here. What about movies? Do you think that they had the same trajectory of change from the 70s to now? That's another place that people have access to, you know, go and see whatever they choose and learn about our world through movies.
Yeah. I mostly focused on TV shows here today. But yeah, movies I think have evolved as well. In again in the 80s and early 90s, they were mostly focused on gay white men that were suffering from AIDS. And they've evolved there too. I had an example that I can't remember. Oh, um, and I mean, Angels in America, Philadelphia did show that suffering. Eventually you got into movies that were dealing more specifically with gay stuff. My favorite example of that would be But I'm a Cheerleader, where this girl who, as it turns out, is a lesbian, gets sent to one of those conversion therapy camps, and it completely makes fun of the camp and everything and stuff. But that was a positive way to deal with gay issues. And there's also been an evolution towards gay characters that are not specifically about their gay in the movies. The example that comes to mind is Scream. Gosh, they've done so many. I don't remember which one. It's either 4 or 5. Has whichever one came out most recently has a character that I don't know if she's lesbian or bisexual or what, but she's making out with another girl in the episode or in the movie, I think. But I didn't know she was a lesbian until she started doing that, or bisexual or whatever, however she identifies. I didn't know she was into girls until she started doing that. Because she's one of the main characters in the show that is kind of the movie, I should say, that is kind of suspected of being the murderer. So I don't want to do a spoiler in case some of you are planning on watching it.
From our YouTube audience, Scott England asked, any thoughts about the increasing visibility and representation of LGBTQ1A communities and the recent increase in proposed passed legislation against those communities? Backlash as a sign of progress?
Yes. And for those of you that are unaware, the federal Congress, and this shocked me because I did not think they were going to get enough senators for this, did codify same-sex marriage in law. So the Supreme Court can reverse the past ruling, but theoretically, same-sex marriage could still stand. And they got, my mom was telling me about this yesterday. I forget if it was 10 or 12 Republican senators to vote for it. That's progress. Back when I was in college, I think there was like one Republican in all of Congress, or maybe two or three, that were supportive. I might be off on that. I see people, but there were not 12 Republican senators. I can guarantee that in 2004 that were for gay marriage. So yes, I do see that as progress. I also think this isn't really related to entertainment media, but I think the business community has been somewhat helpful in a large part. Again, there's some things the business community does with the environment, with other things that I feel very uncomfortable with. But with LGBTQ, there was, I'm going to forget the state, but there was a couple of anti-trans, anti-gay bills that went through a few years back, and some prominent companies said, "Look, if you do this, we're not setting up our new factory or whatever in your state." And all of a sudden, the Republican state legislature changed their mind. Because if there's one thing state legislators and federal legislators listen to, it's money. Uh, so yeah, I just found that funny that they quickly said, "Oh no, this was wrong. We didn't, read it very well." Yeah, right. You just want, uh, this company to set up a big business in your state.
So one thing I really liked about your presentation is the chronology, because two things, it gives us mileposts that we can see, and two, it reminds us that we're always standing on the shoulders of giants, of the people who came before us. I mean, really, if we were back in history in the 1950s, we had the Mattachine Society. That was the first organized group of particularly gay men, but also lesbians became a part of that. And they worked very hard in terms of rights. They took tremendous risks. They suffered a lot of loss, personal loss, because of their stand. But so I like that you do that, because what's interesting to me is where I think we're at now, the next milepost is breaking down the gender stereotypes. And to me, that's really fundamental to dealing with all the gay lesbian issues, is once we break down gender stereotypes. So I'm curious if you've seen anything in the literature and what you were looking at that's looking at the progress in that area. And I think of it particularly in advertising. So, for example, this week in the Aldi's flyer, there's an ad for hiking boots. And they have the men's hiking boots, which are brown, and the women's hiking boots, which are baby blue, right? And it's as if it's as if men couldn't like baby blue and women couldn't like dark brown. I mean, it's like built in, right? So I'm curious if anybody's talking about that.
As far as academic literature, I don't know. It's been a while since I looked at that Pepperdine study. I don't think they addressed that specifically, but I would argue that uh, gender stereotypes, gender sexism is strongly linked to acceptance of LGBTQ people, both with trans and with the rest of the community. Um, as far as your question goes, I've seen commercials now that uh, have. There's one I remember specifically that stuck out in my mind. It was women trying on makeup, and one of the things that was cool about that is a couple of them were full figured. But another thing was that I thought was cool was they were there was a man or at least what someone who was presenting butch, I guess we would say, that was putting on makeup. He thought he looked better, I guess. So uh, it's changing a little bit there. Um, Gender, i- if you break it down, if you really believe in strict gender roles, women are naturally nurturing, men are naturally cold, logical makers. I think these roles are BS, but some people believe strictly in them. Um, if you believe in those, a relationship between two gay men is unbalanced. There's two decision makers, there's no one to nurture, or someone has to play a role that isn't natural to who they are. I would argue that forcing them to be in an opposite sex relationship is doing just that. But anyway, or in a lesbian relationship, there's no cold logical decision maker, and there's just two nurturers. Or again, someone has to play a role that isn't very natural to who they are. Now, if I told my mother that she couldn't make decisions, I'm sure she would have words for me. Uh, uh, but eh, that's just to illustrate how you are correct. I think that the gender stereotypes make a big difference in our acceptance of same-sex couples, bisexuals, transgender, the whole community. Also, I want to talk a little bit about with that question that was a great question. Trans people, those gender stereotypes become even more of an issue, I think, because, stereotype of a biological man is, that he does not wear a skirt, does not wear a dress, does not, want to put makeup on, all that kind of stuff. You know, it's interesting. One of the things I didn't notice in my study because I haven't sought a lot of it out is there's also with YouTube and social media been an influx, and this is mostly hearsay because I haven't seen a lot of it, but I've seen a few of different issues being dealt with because people can uh, bring their social media video there for free for the most part. So it would be interesting to get into more of how they're breaking down gender stereotypes and all that kind of stuff.
It's your Gen X friend again. I care deeply about trans issues, and you mentioned the attacks in our legislature in Missouri and to some extent in Kansas and many, many, many other red states. My nieces and nephews are 21 to 31 now. I have five of them, and I try to talk to them about trans issues. They seem more comfortable and more conversant than people in my generation. And you've shown in your study that people who are millennials, and then I put them in like my 21-year-old nieces, Gen Z, I guess. How can we harness this? How can we harness this? Because I feel like there is something that people can do to stop the legislation. I'm very politically active. I struggle with it even for myself and how to do anything about the Missouri legislature. But it just seems like if we have more and more acceptance and we have a lot of people in the millennial generation and the Gen Z generation, how can we rise up?
Yes, there's sort of two part answer to that question. One is about the rising up, and the other is about changing society. And one of the things these shows do is create a more comfortable atmosphere for people to come out. Um, and so, as Gen Z people or millennials have this more comfortable atmosphere for trans people, more and more trans people will start to come out. That's what happened with the LGB and the Q. That's what will happen with the T. And as they come out, they not only come out to other people in their generation, but usually, eventually, especially with trans, because it's so hard to hide, um, it will come out to family members that are not in that generation. And that will change hearts and minds. Uh, and one of the things I meant to mention in my presentation, could have, I don't know, was that it sort of snowballs. Okay, so Gen Z is more comfortable with trans. These people come out, their families' hearts and minds are changed. Now the world is even a more accepting place, and more people will come out, and it just keeps snowballing like that. Which is it's something, it's nice that there was a environment where more people could come out like that. As far as rising up, um, we need to get new people in the Missouri State Legislature. Uh, I I know people are laughing, but I have contacted my representatives and state senators about issues before that I care about, and because the district I'm in was drawn to eat up Democratic voters in Kansas City, they're usually like, "Heck yeah, I'm behind you 100%." Um, but um, the way they've gerrymandered the districts is so bad that some guy who's representing Branson, I don't know. I don't know the answer to um, dealing with that in Missouri. I do know that one of the few positive things about Missouri politics, or possibly the only one, it tends to be the ballot initiative. And maybe, as we create a safer environment, uh, I'm not sure if we're ready to put trans issues on the ballot yet, but maybe with some issues, as we create a more popular environment, we could put it to a vote of the people for a constitutional amendment. And even with the large majorities the social conservatives have in the state legislature, they, to my knowledge, have never had enough votes to get rid of a constitutional amendment. So maybe as we create a more friendly society for trans people, um, that would be an avenue.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation today. You did touch a little bit on commercials, and I wanted to let you know there was a study done and through WGSN, which does analytics for media and commercial placements, showing when there's different sizes of people, when there are LGBTQIA, in microdosing of showing people, the more people are shown it up to 5 times, the more they start accepting different sizes, different situations, showing like a woman leaving a home and that there's a child and a man's taking care of it, or there's two men taking care of it. It only takes 5 times for people to go, oh, that's a very acceptable situation, because it's shown in very micro dosing things and media will pick up on it. What I wanted to say is, have you seen those more through social media, commercial here? Because the studies that I have as a person that places ads for companies is mostly on the coast. We don't get a lot of those ad placements here in the Midwest. Just very interesting. So it
Gee,
depends
I
on,
wonder why.
I wonder why. Exactly. But what's interesting, if you have a different psychographic as a person, they do hit you with it. So the younger people get hit more with those ads than some of us do, as also a Gen Xer. But as those come through, if people hit on them and like the product, then the other generations do get those ads. So once they start seeing it, so it's a very interesting social dynamic that we have. So if somebody likes New Amsterdam and they start watching the show, they will get the ad. So I think it's a very interesting dynamic. So I wonder if you will ever hit a study to see that. So I thought you might be interested in that as well. But it is very interesting and a very parallel way to introduce people to new situations and new items.
Yeah, I haven't seen that study, but if you'd like to share it with me, I'd love to read it. Yeah, I would really love to read that. I eat this kind of stuff up. Um, but yeah, it's interesting, uh, I think the reason why I've seen an influx of those kind of commercials is for a couple reasons. One, I mostly watch shows that are on streaming services where people are probably just buying ads nationally, and the other is I have a sampling bias. If you watch New Amsterdam, you're probably not a very conservative person. The medical director is about a public hospital, and the medical director is constantly creating new programs to help different segments of the population be healthy. And, the board is always, cracking down on him, saying, we don't have that kind of money. And he says, I don't care. We're helping people. And it's got a ton of episodes with LGBTQ characters. In fact, Dr. Fromm and that doctor that's trans, that I keep forgetting the name of, are in almost every episode. So from that, I have a sampling bias. I watch shows that are mostly progressive people would watch. And I think that's the reason why that's what I've seen an increase in. Um, the other thing is, it may be starting on the coast, but sometimes it moves in. We saw that with same-sex marriage. There was some coastal areas in the 2000s that embraced it, and then it kind of slowly moved in, and then eventually people were comfortable with it enough that we could have a court case without a constitutional amendment.
Richard, we want to thank you for this presentation.
Thank
We're
you.
gonna close up here, and we're going to meet in the library to discuss things further if you want to. And you're welcome to go to the church service out in the hallway. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then I got